Hi guys, how you doing? I think it may be a very small meeting today. Um, I don't know whether the community days in Japan are affecting attendance.
Yeah, I don't know. No, been looking forward to this one though. How things going, Matthew?
It's going well, going well. I guess if it's just the three of us, it might be more collaborative. But as with always, I need to do some housekeeping at the start.
Sure.
So I just need to share my screen. You can see that. So this is going to be a repeat of the OpenChain AI study group that we had the 1st of October. That was for a Europe US time zone. I want to, I guess, highlight some of the things that were there and then open it up for discussion like we did in the meeting. As with all Linux Foundation meetings, the antitrust policy notice is presented at the start and need to follow or you can read the antitrust notice here. It's available on the Linux Foundation website. If there's any questions and you're a Linux Foundation member, you can contact Andy Updegrove. Great. All the administration out of the way. What we did cover last time, we had an SPDX AI bomb profile. Are you guys aware of SPDX and also the AI bomb profile within SPDX?
Yeah, I'm aware of it.
So
Yeah.
they came and gave a presentation.
Yes.
I unfortunately was unable to get anyone to come to this meeting, but I was just going to play the 10 minutes of the recording from the last session. I don't know if you'd find that beneficial.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'll do that. And then I want to kind of open up to the AI sort of study guide, sorry, the what do we call the AI bomb guidelines that we had just before the summer break. And I wanted to go through those. It'd be great
Yeah.
to have your thoughts and input there.
Yeah. Great. Thank you.
So, with the power of Zoom, you can see a YouTube video, I hope. And if I hit play, can you tell me if you can hear any sound? Did you hear that?
Not yet.
No.
Okay, I don't know how to share sound then through the recording. How can we do this? I'm going to stop sharing. I think I needed to. Yeah, here we go.
Myself, well, all of
Is
us have
that
been
better?
working on SPDX.
Yeah, I suppose so.
Great. So this is Karen Bennett. She's the chair of the SPDX AI Bill of Material group. She comes and just introduces it, and then she's just got a few slides. I'm happy just to play the recording. If you want me to stop and ask me a question, then do so. But after that, then we can move on. But hopefully you'll find this useful.
Thanks.
The AI and the data set profiles that is included as part of SPDX 3.0. I know that Matthew had said you guys want to talk about an AI bomb, but I just want to level set where my mind is, and that is I see SPDX as a system now, and AI is just one sort of component of it that has models, data sets, operational, but the whole restructuring of SPDX, which I think all you folks are pretty aware of, now that we have these idea of profiles, you can mix and match them to describe your whole system. So I'm just going to go, and Gopi and Victor, feel free to jump in. One other thing at the end I'll talk a bit about, because I know there's a lot going on in the AI space on governance and model cards, et cetera, et cetera. We're going to give you a feel for how we defined 3.0. And now we're starting to look at 3.1, and we'd love for others to come join us as we evolve into that. But in 3.0, we tried to keep it simple because getting people to fill in these SPDX files is not an easy exercise. And we're trying to keep it so that, tools can be automated to get this information. But as we go forward, just a little background on myself. I'm more of, I participate in a lot of the standards groups, be it ISO, I'm on the ISO board, I'm on the EU project office, I'm on IEEE. And so I can see sort of where the standards are going. What will be the laws and the rules that the governments enforce is still an unknown to me. I just don't see a clear way that everybody's going to come together. I know last week, or maybe it was the week before, the UN has declared that they're going to try and bring all the countries together, have a common set of rules. Just being in all these different standards boards, all of that was also, I'm on the EU AI Act, was part of that group that created that regulation. So I see the standards side. Gopi is more on the, Gopi, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Gopi. I'm happy to be here. I work as a researcher with the Huawei Center for Software Excellence. I've been working for over a decade now on building AI applications, and more recently, I've been looking into how to build trustworthy AI application with ensure while being compliant with regulations and compliant to using dataset licenses. And I also research a lot into building trustworthy foundation model-based software. And over the past 3 years, along with Karen, call it the SPDX AI and dataset profile. And I come mostly from a researcher and engineering background. And I'm happy to answer any questions. Thanks.
Thanks, Gopi. So hopefully everybody can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Great. So I'm sure if you've seen any of Kate's presentations, you've seen this slide that is the timeline associated with SPDX. And with 2023, the AI sort of was introduced into the fold of SPDX. So I think it's not a sort of surprise to anybody. What might be a surprise is, back in 2021, SPDX was actually ISO certified. There's a standard associated with it. And with AI, we're just going through that process right now for the same thing. With 3.0, we introduced profiles. So it's now sort of, building blocks that you can create a system specification. And we plan in 3.1 to have even more profiles, of which, there's hardware, operations, this idea of functional testing. We in the AI working group are also working on sort of what impacts are needed in other fields to do with Gen AI, RAGs, prompting, etc., as well as I'm going to label it as harm or threats that are unique to AI. Where they go in the SPDX profiles is not quite clear yet, but we're at least having those discussions and starting to bring some of that in. So that'll give you just an overview. And as I say, it is being ISO certified, and it's going through the process right now for the AI portion. One of the other groups, Kate and others worked with the NTIA, Software Build and Material Group. They're trying to establish minimum elements. And in 2019, this was the list. Several of us are working with this group right now to redefine what 2024 looked like now that AI is sort of integrated. The good news is so far, the list that they have is pretty much everything is already in SPDX 3.0, with the exception of more information around performance and benchmarking is the one area that we're trying to decide. But if there's interest in this, don't mind hooking you up or sharing on a periodic basis where that's coming. But this group is creating another minimum element list. As they say, we just launched, I don't know how many weeks ago it was Gopi, but 3.0.1, which really was just some cleanup activities. But AI and the data set or model card or models and data set are pretty well defined and solid. And now we're just trying to get some tools to generate these fields automatically. So one of the questions that Gopi and all of us get all the time is, how did you form the list that you have? So the good news is we started with, model cards that Hugging Face, Google had, fact sheets that IBM had, data cards that were out there. Gopi worked with a group, another group on in open source, open datology. Is that what it is, Gopi? And then myself, I tend to bring in a lot of the governance regulations. So we have been working with the medical device regulations, both in the US and the EU, to get them to say, you know, you, as part of being certified a device, you need to have filled in these profiles and these fields to get certified. Similar with the EUA Act, we will go through this in a minute, but we've gone through all of the different clauses from the December sort of document and made sure that there's a field within SPDX where the information be captured and therefore making it relatively easy to get certified. Although that group continues to change, you know, different definitions, etc. So it's ongoing. Myself, I've been heavily involved in the AI, which they're called ethical standards within IEEE, the 7000 series. So we also went through the exercise of whatever was said in these standards, we figured out if there was a field within SPDX that we could fill in and therefore could get certified by, you know, 7001. It required these sets of fields. And we did the similar exercise with ISO as well, with their 72 or 27001 and 42001 standards. That's not to say that in the future we'll be looking at more of the standards, and especially the European ones as they're rolling out. So I think folks have all seen these. These are the profiles that got added into 3.0.1, of which if you're documenting an AI system, you could potentially have fields that are on any of these ones that you would fill in as part of building your SPDX file. So it's not just, I know some folks in NIST, no, not NIST, sorry, in CISA, they call it an AI bomb, and they're only referring to what we talk about as an AI profile. But AI systems are bigger than just this component. So that's why I asked Matthew sort of what is the mindset of what is an AI bomb? Because to me, an AI bomb covers all of these features. And if it's relevant to your AI system, then you should be filling in the information. So again, just a little bit about the standards, but we'll go into this in more detail in a second. And just to give a glimpse before I go into Gopi, Art, and and Kate, myself have this user guide or white paper that someday will be published. Right now it's in Linux editorial phase, but I've gotten Kate's permission that I could share a copy with you guys at the end of today's document. But what it does is it really goes through, well, we'll go through it in a second, but it goes through, what are the fields in the AI and the data sets bomb? What are some use cases and examples of how you would fill those fields in? What are, if you're coming, we took a look at model cards. So, what fields did we take from the model cards and which ones did we not take, and the reason why we didn't take? The same with fact sheets, the same with data cards, and the same with the ISO standards and the medical regulations and the EUA Act. So you can see, according to those different regulations or cards, what ones did we take and incorporate in to SPDX 3.0 and which ones we didn't. But as we go into the next phase of 3.1, we are, of course, are going to relook at, all of these are continually changing, and we'll try and figure out if there's other fields that we need to incorporate now because they're needed, We also, within SPDX, have a number of other profiles, you know, the hardware, the functional safety, testing, operations, service, and as I say, these harm or threats type profiles that AI is going to contribute to, so that you're capturing not just traditional software information, that you will also capture information, you know, associated with an AI system. The other thing is there continue to be tons more standards. In fact, I'm just reviewing 3 more on AI right now that are about to be published from an IEEE. As I say, the UN is documenting sort of a governance plan that we'll need to look at. There's something called harm cards that we're looking at to incorporate. Gopi's done a great job, and I would highly recommend, you know, bringing him back and having him talk about sort of where software is evolving to as we move into Gen AI, prompts, RAGs, etc. And then another area that we've had some preliminary discussions, but we is around impact statements. You know, do we have a link out? A lot of standards in particular requests that you have an impact statement for your software, and they have a set of fields that you need. Do we add those fields to SPDX, or do we just have a link out to, you know, some spreadsheet? The same thing, I you know, was talking to Sandra last week. We in IEEE and ISO very much, we need a way to flag if content or data has been generated, or even the software has been generated by AI itself, as well as I'm on the Biden executive order, and there's a working group associated with synthetic data. And so that's another area that I can see that working group is going to request that people have to document if they're using synthetic data, because it comes with the risk of, you know, copyright infringement, patent infringement, and who knows what else types of harm can come from that. So that gives you an idea. But before I go to this one, we do have this document. The link is here. I mean, you can get your traditional model diagrams of SPDX, or you can actually dive into the code itself. It's all up on GitHub. But we've found that, especially for the tools developers, as well as explaining to people what SPDX and how you create these files, it needed another. Initially, we called it a white paper, but I come from more product background, and it's more like traditional user guides. It tells you how to use this language of SPDX. So before I dive into that, maybe there's some questions that folks want, or I can skip to the document. But questions, any questions?
Guys, do you want me to kind of fast forward to that document bit, or do you want to listen to the Q&A?
How was the Q&A?
I think there was just one question here. They brought the document up, and then, yeah, there was more Q&A afterwards.
I'm easy.
Thanks, Karen, for that really good overview of the work that you and the team have done there. I think there's clearly lots of good work around AI bill of materials, and, you know, even touching on the synthetic data and all the other good points there. I don't have any specific questions for you, but maybe others on the call do.
Yeah, I mean, I know, Matthew, you had said folks wanted to know sort of reasons why, etc. I'm just going to pull up the white paper. It's rather long. I didn't realize it was this long, Gopi. But we would love feedback. I mean, that is our biggest sort of want of talking with people. You're welcome to come. We have a working session every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern. I know it's not the best of times, but it, feel free to use our Slack lines or, GitHub to ask any questions or any fields that you see are missing that you think we should come. Because one of the things that we're planning to do is similar to how we wrote this document after sort of it was all done and said. But I think this next go around, we will document before we go and actually have the fields and maybe send it around for review before we start implementing it in actually the GitHub repository. So with that, let me share the document. But as I say, it's protected at the moment, but if you request permission, as I say, Kate will give you permission to take a look. Whoops, wrong one.
Are you able to share the link in the chat now, or maybe send an email around later?
It's in the document, but I can send it around. But let me just show you sort of the flow of it. So, it's got an overview. It shows you the idea of an AI system type diagram. And you now have
Karen,
yep.
Can you zoom out just a little bit more? I'm not sure if I'm getting the full screen.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, I'm not getting the full screen either.
Or maybe I am. Maybe what is the most right thing that you see that we should be seeing?
Should you be seeing a diagram?
Yeah. Do we see so data set files 1, 2, and 3 on the right hand side? Is that the complete screen?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Disregard my comment. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just sharing the Google Doc. But as I say, you can see sort of you have AI build packages, models, training sets, etc. That are part of your AI system. So you have profiles that can define these. We then went into what motivated us for separating it into an AI and a data set profiles, because I know our sister group at Cyclone haven't sort of reached that decision. I think they're going to find it, because you don't always have, you might have data and you want to be able to document that and sell that. You might have an AI model and you might want to do that. And then you might have a whole system that includes all of it. So I think being able to parcel it into different components was we talked about it for quite a while when we were developing the profiles. But you can see our motivation. And then sort of why it matters, why we broke it down into profiles. As I say, we go into quite detail about our methodology of how we got to the list that we got to. And here's an example of sort of data sets. So we looked at a number of data sets. They have certain fields, that are in their data set. We mapped it to sort of the actual internal SPDX fields and in which profile it was in. And then you can see an example of one that we decided as a working group that we weren't going to include, at least for that initial release. And you can see sort of our explanation why. And we did that for data sets. We did that for model cards. Again, you can see sort of all the different fields in the different model cards, Hugging Face, Google's, whoever is out there. If you have sort of cards that you want us to look at, and IBM, they didn't use model cards, they used fact sheets. So again, we went through the similar exercise. We also went through the exercise to do with the standards and regulations. As I say, The EUA Act, which I'm sure over in Europe is something that is talked about, but it at least allows you to see the different clauses that are in the EUA Act and sort of what field is in the AI bomb and then which profile it's in XPDX. And then we went through all the medical devices out there, the regulations, both the European and the US, and did a similar exercise. Showed you which fields that you would fill in. We went through the same exercise, as I say, for the ISO and IEEE standards. So in 7000, it has a clause like this. This is the field that you would fill in to be compliant with that standard. So you would have to fill all relative information. And then we go into the key profiles and sort of what they contain. And then in each of the key profiles, there's mandatory fields and optional fields. And so again, you can see the field that you have to fill in SPDX, which profile it's in, whether it's mandatory or not, and then a general description about what that field would be composed of. With AI, we have created some new relationships as part of 3.0. Of course, there's the license one for all software, including AI, that you have to have a license relationship. But hopefully this gives you a field. I mean, I'm going to go down to the next part. So that gives you a table of all the things. And then the user guide itself talks about each of the fields, whether they're mandatory, gives a little example, code example, syntax of how you would use it for each of the fields within the AI and the data set profiles. And then at the end, it's going to be a long one because there's so many fields. We have real world evidence examples of which Gopi and Art, who works with us as well over in the EU, they're up on GitHub and we're planning to put more up there, but it would show you, how you would, there's an AI system and how you would map it into SPDX so that, a tools developer, etc., can take a look at it. And do. And then, as I say, future directions. We also put in a curated standard list of all the AI standards that are coming out so that you can pick and choose which ones might be relevant to you. And that's pretty much it. So hopefully when I take a look at the white paper, I will post the link right now, you'll give us feedback because this is, for all of us. As I say, I do, my area is self-driving cars, and that's the context that I came in. I only joined sort of SPDX 3 years ago with Gopi, and was trying to bring in the need to document some of our code because what I could see happening in at least some of the car manufacturers I was working with, developers were deciding who lives or dies. And it really worried me that, I was working with BMW and their developers were doing one set of rules. And then I would go to Mercedes-Benz and they were using another set of rules. And it made me realize that we needed some kind of standard or whatnot associated with, or you at least have to tell people, what are those decisions and documentation of the code that are going into that AI app. And again, I'm sure with all of your experiences in building these, you're seeing the same thing. So again, Gopi and Victor, since you Victor's actually a key player in our working groups as well. Is there anything else that you wanted to add? I was just trying to do an overview, but I think the bottom line is you all want, you're looking for this white paper. I think in general, that's what people are looking for. Even, I get from, I'm on the Tiger teams associated with CISA. And everybody's trying to figure out, Cyclone DX, SPDX, which format should I use? And overall, it just depends on, what information you need to capture. But I think this document will help people figure out. And if it doesn't, let us know, because we'll, oh, Victor says he's in a car, so he's not going to be able to come on. So
Yeah. Hey, Karen, if this is.
There you go, guys. What did you think of that presentation there?
Yeah, that was really interesting. I haven't been to one of these for a while, so I'm catching up. The link to the documents, which was that incredibly complicated Google Docs one, I don't suppose, is it possible to paste that? Otherwise, I can try and rip it out of the screen grabber.
I don't have it, but
okay, don't worry.
I'm
That's
sure
right.
what I will do is when I send the minutes round for these meetings, I'll get Karen to send me that link, so we're not typing it out.
Excellent, thanks. Yes, no, that would be it.
And do you guys follow the SPDX world? Do you think these fields in an AI bomb would be useful?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Follow would be putting it too strongly from my point of view, but yes, I agree, it would be useful.
Sorry, I missed that, the first bit.
I'd say follow would be putting it too strongly. I'd be overrepresenting my ability to spend time on it. But yes, I do check in with it, and it's useful that they're doing that stuff. Sorry, I spoke over you there, Stephen.
No, not at all. No, but in terms of the use of having an AI bomb, I think it's a very interesting piece of work. So I'd be very keen to have a look through the document. It's pretty topical right now, of course, with the OSI definition getting out there as well, and some of the reactions that have been to that.
Yeah, so as I say, I've not been to one for a while, so I was interested in, and I think the Open Model Initiative stuff from the Linux Foundation has come out since I was last at a meeting as well. So I wondered if that had been discussed in the last few meetings and how that relates to the OpenChain work.
I don't think it has actually. The last time I think I had a discussion was outside of the OpenChain study group on that AI definition.
Yeah, because it's obviously quite controversial, I think, still, and appears to be. I don't know. The last thing I saw, they seem to have made some fairly major changes at the last minute.
Was this the definition of open AI that you're referring to?
Yeah, so the OSI's definition had quite a lot of bun fighting on LinkedIn about it. Oddly, all of the discussions seem to take place on LinkedIn, as far as I can see, which is a bit. I've never thought I'd see kind of open discussions being primarily hosted on a Microsoft platform, but I know that there've been a lot of eruptions within the OSI, and that some people have not stayed on the board as a result of not wanting to be in position when the definition is ratified. So yes, I think that's and obviously it's not OpenChain's position to take a view one way or the other, but I guess the fact that there is so much opposition to the idea that, I think the arguments, as I understand them, are around access to data and being able to describe a model as open if you can't have complete access to the underlying training data.
What direction is the study group going in, Matthew? With
this probably brings us on to the topic that we spent the most time discussing last time. I think when we originally set out the guidelines for, and if I just share my slide, I think I have the goals that we wrote in January of this year, which in the grand scheme of things is not a large amount of time, but in AI, I think it sounds like a million years. So the goals for the study group in January: establish an industry-wide agreement on AI management, developing AI principles for building trust in the supply chain.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the general concept of producing some form of guidance document was what the outcome of this group was. It's clearly represented by a whole host of different companies supported by the Linux Foundation, which of course has thousands of members. But over the course of this year, knowing what other groups are doing, knowing what other ISO standards are coming out, we kind of, in the last meeting that we had, kind of came to the point that we're going to focus on AI bill of materials and how we believe managing AI bill of materials can build trust in the supply chain. So this was the document that we started before the summer, and I'm hoping, here we go. I can post this in the chat as well for your thoughts and discussions. And what we did in the last session was we went through this. Now, I think that half answers your question, but it also takes us to the next part. Was there any other comments you want to make before we dive into this in more detail?
I guess thank you for reminding me about all of that. I think maybe then what that means is that it's not that relevant for this group really, in that being able to flag what variety of compliance with the various different openness standards there are, and possibly just doing that via SPDX, because it sounds like they're doing very good work in that area, is all that's really needed here.
Maybe I misunderstood what you're saying. I think what my interpretation of what the study group want to get out is a general principle that's jurisdiction agnostic and more defining the process to have good AI bill of materials management, but it doesn't go down into the detail to say you need these fields as required by the EU AI Act or the
oh,
SPDX.
sure. I suppose I was thinking more along the lines of, it is, I mean, if we sort of cast this back into the open source world, sort of the earlier versions of OpenChain, is the fact that something is OSI, the open source definition, OSD compliant rather, is that a relevant field to talk about? Because that is global and jurisdiction, pretty much jurisdiction agnostic. And I guess the same question is being thrown up at us now. Do we care as people who are practically engaged in making sure that, due diligence around packages of software has been undertaken? Do we care about whether these slightly more ethereal questions, or whether they comply with one definition or another of what somebody thinks is open? Or are we kind of just wanting to be able to record that this group feels that this particular bill of materials would be counted as an open package, whereas another person might say, no, it doesn't go far enough, it doesn't include what I would require in order to describe it as open?
That is a really good point, and I'm not the person to answer that question. It's for the community to decide whether we feel as though that is something we want in there. But it's a great point.
What I was saying earlier, I think, was that we could maybe just palm that off on SPDX, who also, I think, have a very pragmatic approach and aren't going to want to get involved in these theological wars. It's from where I work, it's the academics who work in this area are often quite keen on how open things are, and often quite active members of those communities where these discussions are reach quite a high level of temperature. But I think that's probably not something that we need to engage with here. I hope, anyway.
Okay, so maybe we remove this.
I'm
going to leave it in, and I'd like others. I mean, this is part of the community, isn't it? That we consider this.
Yeah.
So what we did last time, and we have 20 minutes, but there's only 3 of us, was we just went through this document. I put it in the chat. It's open to all. A bit of blurb on the start about how we consider it. If you weren't in some of the last sessions, we discussed ISO 5230, which is the OpenChain licensing standard. We discussed ISO 42001, the AI management system. And this was the SPDX standard that was mentioned in the video just before. We felt as a community that there was probably a gap somewhere between ISO 42001, which is general AI management, and the very specific fields that SPDX state in this ISO 5962, and we felt there's probably somewhere in the middle where there is additional guidance that we can provide for good AI bill of material management. And what we discussed, again, almost taking the licensing standard that OpenChain had developed in the past, and just see if we could mirror some of the clauses. So we touched on the fact that there should be an AI compliance policy, and we changed this to AI bill of materials policy for a company. We don't specify what that is, but you can imagine a company defining some basic policy documents. I don't think there's anything too controversial, but please chip in if you disagree. The second point was competence. We shall identify roles and responsibilities for those who are creating or using the AI bomb, and also defining the program as well. So I guess just identifying, good roles and responsibilities, and the people have the necessary skill sets for those roles. If you think about it in a company, a company is likely to hire people who have skill sets for a specific role. In academia, you can imagine getting a PhD student, they will have skills and knowledge for handling it. So this is probably already happening, but we're just defining this or stating it. We're making people aware of that AI bomb policy, and any objectives around AI. Again, this feels more administrative for setting up good practices. We want to define what an AI program is, or companies are doing that, or academic institutions are doing that, so people understand what is involved in an AI program. Again, this is probably happening. The next section we touched on was license obligations. This is where we felt there was a lot of good strength here in the OpenChain history, and so we wanted to bring this through. So we wanted to define, we say an institution should have a process for reviewing and identifying licenses that are going to go into a model for their data sets. Maybe not just training, but testing and validation and verification data sets. So this process could be very simple. You simply check the license, or it could be a more thorough review where a lawyer is getting involved in documenting and archiving. But we felt this was an important step to, again, build trust in our ecosystem. Thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, so we're kind of not operating, I guess, here in the kind of environment that we were with software, where we're talking probably about, these licenses could be anything at all. They're just however you got access to the underlying data. And so characterizing them, or are we asking people to characterize them? So reviewing the identified license involved data sets, I suppose. So I think that's fine. I guess what are we asking them to, look for and to report, I guess, is what I'm not clear about.
Yeah, and I don't think we ever got into that detail. It's more, you are checking, and you as an institution or an individual need to determine whether that's suitable, but you are at least identifying the licenses for the IP that you're using.
Okay, yes, right.
Do you think there's room for more detail here?
Well, where we're saying identified licenses here, so are we saying basically have a go? If you've got a whole load of, I'm thinking about the kind of chaotic environments in which I tend to operate. You think you've assembled all the relevant licenses, that apply to the data that you're using. And that's your identified license list, and you have a process for going through those and making sure that you understand what they mean. But there isn't any sense there that you have made sure that all necessary rights to actually use that data have been covered by the licenses you have. Is that right?
That is my interpretation of this. However,
sure,
this is a community. If we want to consider that, which I don't think is, I think if we wrote that down, I think other people would support that based on the fact that it's license compliance, it's their own interpretation of those obligations.
Yeah, I mean, I guess
nothing subjective, as it were.
I mean, I guess in the spirit of this being some sort of standard, saying that you have a process for identifying a documented process for identifying what licenses are necessary for all of your data set, all of your data sets, and then saying, having run that process, whatever the result was, you have a process for making sure that, having gathered that you have licenses, you've also assessed whether they do the necessary for you to actually undertake what you're doing and to potentially distribute the output of what you're doing. That's probably enough, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think so.
So anyway, sorry, this is merely just me trying to grok what you're putting up on the screen live rather than me making particular suggestions. So feel free to move on. I'm just trying to get my head around what's being suggested.
And I think, I mean, this is half the point. We have these working sessions for other people's thoughts and ideas to come in.
Right.
I mean, speaking from our organizational point of view, we're at a point where we really want to be better able to understand what data sets we have available to us and under what terms they come into the organization, because we don't feel we're at that point at the moment. So being able to point to a standard which says, well, look, if we're going to be emitting these things in the way that we currently emit software, not necessarily with the most brilliance of compliance even there, these are the sort of systems we need to have in place. So ISO 42001 was useful from that point of view. It was a document that you could point to and say, look, this is how, in general, the industry is thinking about the kind of steps necessary to create a workflow for producing these kind of outputs. Mm-hmm. And so, from my point of view, I very much doubt that we will ever be, fully compliant with whatever is suggested as a result of this study group. But having something to point to and say, this is the kind of thinking that we really owe to our downstream consumers is very useful.
Okay.
On the license compliance section, Matthew, the language feels quite different from the original 5230 in terms of looking at different open license use cases. Is that?
Indeed, and that was what was brought out in the last session. We said consider removing this with 5 and highlight how model data sets is used. So we thought about stripping this out. This has just been a cut and paste, but stating in our license compliance section, we're also reviewing its use, because if something is being used in a certain way, we also need to check that we have the license permission for that.
There's that 2 steps in 5230 of sort of understanding obligations and then complying. So that was where that would have come from. And I mean, I jumped ahead a bit, but it was sort of, I mean, when you get to the sort of the bill of materials piece, or maybe even because the regulatory environment is very, very specific and very different to sort of free and open source software.
Mm-hmm.
Was there any kind of consideration of at least, because you want to stay regulatory environment sort of agnostic, but good practice management would mean that you need to keep track of the information that is required by the regulatory environment. And I was just wondering if that would be an explicit
I think so.
You ought to have in the bill of materials. Because made my point. But if you look at the risk framework that's in the US legislation, not legislation, guidance. It's quite explicit what the AI risk management frameworks are and the like. But I suppose that SPDX will have created all of those hooks. And I think it might be worth making explicit tracking and understanding regulatory environment.
Yeah. It's a great point, and I do like that.
Cool. Okay.
So we did focus on this section in some detail, partly because SPDX had just presented, as you heard from Karen earlier, and we felt a lot of these things were overlaying what we originally had before Karen presented was model, data set, trade, all these different data sets. We said we should look at the license, how it should be deployed, how it should stop malfunctioning. I think this is a requirement of the EU AI Act.
Yeah.
Ownership, liability, and what is out of scope. I think some of these things certainly fall within the SPDX remit. And so we said, we just consider removing all of this and just say, here are examples of AI bill of materials. And at the very bottom, it says, you can look at the SPDX AI profile, Hugging Face, or other relevant AI bombs.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think you can do that. I suppose I'm thinking about a situation in which you're trying to work out whether the use that you're planning to put this thing to falls within whatever the kind of ethical carved outs or the field of use carve outs there are. I mean, it's all of this field of use stuff that's really confusing, and which we just didn't have with open source software. It's one of the main virtues of open source software is we didn't have it. But once you introduce it, it suddenly, I suppose in my mind, the larger question is this all going to be so regulated that the fact that it's open at all becomes irrelevant, because open doesn't really mean anything in this space. The things which actually are genuinely, it can be used without the kind of finely detailed sort of compliance work that you would have if this wasn't, something which is, inverted commas, open. It's just going to be like anything else. It's just going to be like any other kind of commercial software transfer deal. You're not going to be able to sort of say, yeah, but open makes it easier, because in this case, open doesn't really make it easier. Sorry, I'm being very negative.
Because it's so heavily regulated.
Yeah, and you're still going to have to say, right, here's what we're actually planning to do. Now, how does that map onto the probably multiple and not quite congruent definitions of usage, and what falls inside and outside ethical usage given the different regulatory domains? All of that stuff is, I mean, I have faith that that this is an emerging technology that people don't want to rein in and make impossible. So possibly we will get some kind of regulatory synthesis around this that will mean that it won't be made impossible. But yeah, so for the moment, I guess, yes, leaving that kind of stuff out and just saying we trust that SPDX will be able to fill this down to the different kind of categories of usage that we can declare that our outputs are suitable for, and that those will map onto and be sufficiently fine-grained to be able to do regulatory compliance work in each one of the areas that we operate. And all we're going to say is make sure that you are fully declaring all of the things within the SPDX framework, which will allow that compliance work to be done.
Yeah. Very good point. I think that's more consistent with Piers. We had another comment.
I just joined the Open Model Initiative Discord, which I didn't know existed. So I guess that's a little Linux Foundation people think, given that it's the Linux Foundation.
It's going to be a really interesting thing to get right. This sort of section 9. So the heading of having an AI content review and approval process, I think in itself, so that's kind of really valuable, and that may in itself want to be made more explicit. So yes, then there needs to be an internal content review and approval process, and then we jump into the information that may be part of that review and approval process. What's the general debate been around the need to specify the content that should be reviewed and approved, as opposed to leaving that the definitions of AI bombs and the like to other bodies, because again, it's a very different context, isn't it, for this guidance compared to when 5230 was written.
Yeah, I guess here between 9 and 9.1, it feels as though there is definitely a change, isn't there, of the tone of the document?
Yeah. You should have a content review and approval process, and that will have a number of elements within it. Then this is where we potentially get caught up on the definitions of what is open and what is not open, because if the purpose is to provide guidance on how to do good practice management of open source AI models, even though the definition of it is not complete, OpenChain in itself will therefore need to have an opinion of all the elements that need to be tracked, reviewed and approved to be able to offer in good faith an open source model.
And to be honest, we have gone back and forth on whether to put open or proprietary in here, and we're just like, let's deal with that later, and it's getting to it.
Okay, well, I won't reopen that debate, but that's
it's a very good point, though.
But that's the thing that goes through my head when I look at this section, in terms of the information, because there's a degree of overlap in all the different directions that you already pointed out in terms of the 42001 and SPDX and the like, but there's still a role for OpenChain to define what good practice looks like at the kind of level that has been done before. It's still there. Yeah.
So, I mean, we're at the top of the hour now. I mean, you've got access to this document if you wanted to review and add further comments. We've got another session in another couple of in about 4 weeks' time. If you're really keen, I'm happy to continue chatting outside of this remit. We did have a list of things that are really out of scope that we touched on, and we were kind of all in agreement that we can cross that bridge when we come to it. But the last point I will make is we want to try and change this AI study group to a working group now, because we have this information. So what you may see through some of the mailing list over the next few weeks.
Working group. Great. Well, thanks for taking the time this morning, Matthew. It's been really, really useful.
Yeah,
I hope you found it helpful, guys.
I did indeed. Thank you very much.
Will you be at Open Compliance Summit?
Where in
Tokyo?
In California?
No, the one in Tokyo coming up end of the month.
No, I'm not in Tokyo.
All right. Okay. Cool.
But I am going to California in November.
Right. Fun. Okay.
You take care.
See you soon. Bye now.
Bye.
Cheers.